Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, welcome to Expedition Self. I am Sam Parrotto, and I'm a fellow seeker and grower and sojourner. We're on this path together, and it's so easy, I think, to lose sight of why we need to keep growing. And so that's my focus each week, is to hopefully kind of get you back in the conversation. I don't think a lot of us have lots of people around that are always talking about growth, and to inspire you, hopefully, and also give you some ways to think about it. But, I like to talk about the ways to think about life from an inside self perspective, and also hopefully to help you see the possibilities in the everyday of your routine and your thinking so that you can bring more of you to the moment and then use that moment to learn and grow. So today's show is about that missing feeling. And I'm really looking forward to talking about how to understand what it is and how to create space that invites it in. As I was preparing for this show, I thought about Shel Silverstein's book called The Missing Piece. And, it's illustrated where there's a round circle with a little pie piece that's missing. And this is his song that he sings, right? So it set off, here's where it goes. So it set off in search of its missing piece. And as it rolled, it sang this song. Oh, I'm looking for my missing piece. I'm looking for my missing piece. Heidi-ho, here I go, looking for my missing piece. So hopefully by the end of this hour, we will have at least found a bit about the missing piece. And you'll be able to feel like you have some tangible pathways to think about it. This is a call-in show. I love call-in callers, and the number is 202-570-7057. And you can call in, and Chris, the producer, will answer and let me know that you're there. And as soon as I can get to a stopping point, I will invite you on just to talk or chat or talk about how the material is landing for you or something in your life that has to do with going inside. But first, I want to take a bit of time and talk about my frame of reference with all things, because it's really, where I focus and what I'm seeking in each and every moment of my life. And it sets up this framework for all that I talk about. I'm thinking it might help you to distinguish the framework that you operate out of for yourself too. So I want to feel this fully engaged, fully alive, turned on, tied into, intimately connected, self-aware, seeking, listening, learning, kind of receiving sense all of the time. And I mean 100% of the time. So this quality of being vitally plugged into me and to life, which means everything that's happening, it's the be all and end all for me. I don't just do growth, between 9 and 11 or when there's a difficult conversation. I want to feel fully like pulsing in every minute. So what this means is that I try to take each and every moment and I plump it up, plump, 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 right? And bring all of my attention to what's happening. So that, I can take in all that I can possibly absorb and perceive, and that I'm looking for this all of the time. I don't have certain activities that I write off to the mundane or the habitual or the blow it off because it doesn't matter anyway. And to go further, I don't want to numb out. I don't want to bypass my deepest sense of being. I don't want to anesthetize myself against my own emotional pain. So everything I talk about on my show has to do with identifying and working with obstacles that get in the way of my fullest vital way of life, right? So I'm thinking that they might get in the way of yours, and I bring a magnifying glass to the circumstances that lots of people just accept them for what they are, and they go along with it. Now, when I say I'm committed to this, I'm not claiming to have it all mastered or handled. It's just that because I lead with that, I get a lot of constant feedback and material and fodder for my process. And then, of course, what that does is it helps raise my game, and I get to feel so much more alive. So I say no. I don't have to accept anything for the way that it is. But I also, right, I don't have to make it wrong because it exists. I can instead see it, for the opportunity that it is to bring myself more fully. And by doing that, it becomes more because of what I brought. And by doing that, then more life happens. And then I generate my own richer experience. That's what every show is about, how to do that. And of course, what it means is that I'm going to feel more and sense more and stir up my unconscious more. And when that happens, this is the part I think it's really easy to overlook. I'm going to need to constantly develop new thinking and new bridges and different structures to accommodate the shifts and changes that result from that. So every time I go through a layer of growth, or I peel a layer around that onion, then I end up having to re-look at how I've set my life up, or where I spend my time, or how I operate inside a relationship. When I say we're on a journey and we are fellow seekers, I'm hoping to help you up your game too when it comes to your personal transformation. I am wanting to call out your apathy or your self-protection, bring it into the light of day so that you can see it more clearly. And I believe we're all connected, that when you do that and I do that, that something happens in the world. And of course, we get the personal benefit of the payoff of that. Today's show is really born out of that specifically, which is why I wanted to just go into it in a little more depth. That apathy that sounds like, oh, it's just the way it is, or, well, I accept the experiences I have for what they are. I just want to be grateful for what I'm giving and just accept and allow. This thinking, while it is a layer of what's needed, it can also be used to numb us out to wanting to feel more. And really only you can decipher and expose the truth to yourself. So I want you to think of it in layers. And I know I talk about these layers a lot, but it is how I visualize the growth process. And so the layer of needing to be enough, well, it's certainly missing for most of us in some context or another. And so you might be there right now, needing to relate to everything that's going on in your life as though you are enough and it is enough. Or perhaps you're at that layer where you have really come full circle and seen that you critique and assess everything, and that judgment's probably right in there, and that you're working on just being grateful for all that exists and for your breath. Let's not forget that one, right? And for what works in your world. So these are layers that need to be worked, and they need to be validated and affirmed. So I don't want today's show to overlap or replace that, because those things are essential. But today's show is about the layer where you let yourself off the hook, from wanting to feel that missing something, that je ne sais quoi, and being someone who is willing to figure it out and bring it and facilitate it and be the source of it in your circles, that missing something, that missing feeling. That's what I'm calling the it. Today is about lifting the blanket on the part of you that would want it, but because you don't know how to create it, or you don't want to be at odds with others, or you find yourself in conflict with the traditions and norms of your relationship circles, you just accept it for what it is. It's also about the part of you that thinks the missing feeling just happens by accident and doesn't and it doesn't even recognize that it's missing maybe most of the time because you don't miss what you've not had enough time to want or notice. That's a little bit circuitous, but this there is the place, right, where we don't even know what we're missing. And then there's the place where we haven't had it enough to realize we're missing it. So we're just, we see a moment or a situation or an event in our life and go, oh, it was there, right? So that this missing feeling that I'm describing, it may or may not be conscious for you. But in order to work with it, you're going to be drawing on that layer within yourself that is discerning and wanting more and needing to challenge the "it is what it is" part of your thinking. And it's the place where you're willing to engage that bathtub full of emotions that might be wrapped around why you accept less from the circumstances and events and interactions that you participate in. So I hope I've set it up for you to really think about your own growth process and not shelve the part of you that's working on being enough, and speak to the part of you that's accepting things that really you could be working on or you could be bringing yourself to. So let's get into this. Let's talk about all the scenarios that we might notice this missing feeling, and then maybe you could think about some of them too. So it's any family get together or social get together. It's doing the dishes with someone or in the room where others are talking. It's attending a school function with other parents and your kids. It's all things vacation, 360 degrees in any direction you look. It's working on a project with coworkers. It's the conversation after a funeral. It's the monthly discussion about family finances. Maybe it's the time you spend writing a book or your column or your notes. And it's even really, as another example, it's organizing your closet, right? Because it's about really showing up and saying it doesn't have to be what it is. It doesn't have to be laborious. It doesn't have to be empty. So it's really anything. And it's especially more noticeable when you do it with others. Because when you do something by yourself, it's so full of your thoughts and images and vision and feelings that you can miss the void in there because you're the one filling it up and you're used to playing around and exploring in your head. But when you're with other people, it has much more potential to be aglow. Like the space shines brighter because you're not filling it up with just yourself. So let me ask you the question. Do you find yourself wanting right now to name this missing feeling? Like, what is it? Right? Is your mind racing around attempting to define or corral, like what it actually is? Right? Like, yes, the mind is at work all the time doing what it always does, framing up, pinning down, making things identifiable, getting them in lists and getting them to be orderly. But for now, just see if you can think of some scenario, some moment, some place in time when you felt a void. Maybe it's a little bit of it, a little emptiness, right? There was something that you walked away with, this sliver of unfulfilled wanting. And maybe you left this point in time, this interaction, maybe you even left it wondering like what's going on with me, is something not here, like why it happened, or your mind was running over it and around it, what someone said that caused it to leave you feeling the way you did. For just this moment, allow yourself to simply feel without labeling that unrecognizable vacuum. So breathe into it and breathe out. And just for a moment, just feel for it. Because, this conversation is going to make a lot more sense, and it'll resonate more deeply with you if you find the place that I'm talking about that comes out of your life, that's specific and unique to you. So you want to just breathe in, allow yourself to feel that unrecognizable vacuum. I couldn't get that out of my mouth. That comes from being in a scenario or being with others and feeling like there is something missing. All right, so when we come back from break, we will start to talk about what it's all about and where it comes from.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Well, we're back. I'm Sam Parrotto, and we are talking about that missing feeling today, and I'm so glad you're here. So before we went on break, I asked everyone who's listening to check in and see if you can find a moment or a situation or an interaction where you found yourself walking out of it, wishing that something else happened, or wondering why you felt this unrecognizable vacuum. I cannot say that word today. All right. So it happens for me when I'm in group conversations with people where vulnerability seems to be missing. There's nothing fresh, nothing new. It's on repeat. Storytelling that seems to reinforce stagnancy, meaning it's kind of like the story's been told 7,000 times without any insight about it. And of course, the challenge with storytelling, even though it's such a part of our human experience, is that it happened in the past already. So the emotional connection to the person, if I'm there and the story's being told and they're lost in that moment, inaccessibility is going on. So instead of people bringing in something that is raw and yet unwritten, there's a reliance on what's in the brain, on the shelves, in the pantry, that's already been stored. And so what also goes with this is that when I'm in a group with people who are really intellectual and they like to quote a lot of facts or historical data, or gear the conversation around this kind of, repartee that's like a debate simply for the sake of debate, what I notice is that I start to feel kind of empty. And I think what I'm describing is super common, and it's happening all the time. And I do it. I engage in it on that level, and I'm thinking everyone does. So it reminds me of when I was first married in my early 20s, and I was starting to experiment, with what this missing piece felt like in my life. And I remember being at a restaurant in South Jersey with my then husband at dinner. And as I said to him, I had planned this all day. Like I figured out, I could talk about this and I could try to be creative about it. And so I said, I think we should share 3 pieces of new information with each other every day. Like then it could feel different, and we could talk about that new information. So I then spent the next 2 hours trying to describe what constituted new information. And as I look back on it now, I think it was me trying to start closing the gap on the missing feeling that I'm talking about today. So I suppose the question you want to ask yourself is, what makes you feel deeply involved and enraptured emotionally in any given moment? So I just described it, what it is for me, that the rinse, rehash, repeat, pulling from someone's brain, that what's already been processed and replaced, it's something that doesn't do it for me. And the dry intellect at play, that doesn't do it for me either. I mean, it's not that I listen, and I do and appreciate and hold the space for that. And I can be very open to receiving what someone's sharing, but if that's all there is, I will leave missing something. And I'm thinking you might be saying, gosh, she sounds really judgmental. But really underneath the judgment is this experiential vacuum. And I'm talking about this in the context of interactions, but it can also happen when you're just at work, right? You're just working on your project or your life. You can have that same empty space if you're not connecting, right, with your inner self then. If the only thing people bring is where they are on the project, the dry problems they're having, the next steps, or a constant complaint that doesn't get opened up or worked through, then, well, that'll lose me too. Because for me, the human element and what's happening and what's getting discovered and what's unearthed, well, it makes things compelling to my heart, and it calls me out, calls me forward. It asks me to get out of my head. So let me repeat this question that I think we're here to ponder today. What makes you feel deeply involved and enraptured emotionally in any given moment? So as I describe what causes me to feel more, it's important to recognize that I have to provide the same. I don't get to sit over on the sidelines and say, ooh, deliver for me. Go ahead. Come on through. So I get to feel this awesome sense of something inside my belly. So not getting lost in stories that I've already processed, not talking just for talking's sake, getting vulnerable about what's happening in the moment, digging around inside for what's fresh and what's real, what's unspoken, and what's emotionally compelling. This is the stuff that fills me and leaves me nurtured and uplifted rather than longing for what's missing. In the beginning, I have to start with, what am I bringing? Where am I getting lost in repetitive past stuff that's bogging down what's possible here? When I'm not willing to be at risk with myself, well, then the space is deadened. Here's what I'm trying to say. If we're gonna find what's missing, well, then we have to look at where inside of ourselves we're creating a deadened, desensitized, numbed out exchange or share or the way we show up. Where aren't we bringing new information, right? First to ourselves and then to others. Where aren't we emotionally at risk? And where do we come across like we're in control of our thoughts and our feelings? And perhaps we're very concluded and locked in and right about it all. There's little opening there. So it's like a hamburger. I'm going to use a hamburger. Whatever you want to make as the black bean burger in the middle, that's you. That's the you at risk. The you noticing that you're falling back on stories from the past or repeating the same comments over and over. Okay, you're the, if I don't know, if you eat a juicy steak burger or if you eat a black bean burger, I want you to think about that part of the burger is you and all that I've just been talking about. And then there's the mustard or the ketchup or the mayonnaise. So that's the opening of your heart to really listening, to listening to yourself, to listening what someone else is doing or saying. That's the place where you're really, it is a willingness, right? To listen through the lens of, how can I hear you for the first time? And then you've got the lettuce. Now, I realize some of you may not eat lettuce on your burgers, but I order extra lettuce. I like lettuce on my burgers. And I think that has to do with the other person's willingness to respond to your probes, to respond to what you offer up, to your gift of what you're bringing, to build something that's more emotionally fulfilling. So let me stop and talk about that for just a moment. I think I'm moving a little fast today. If I'm in a conversation or working with someone and I say, hey, say more about that. What happened for you? Or what were you experiencing? Well, they can go all over the place with that. They could answer with 2 words. They could tell me 3 stories, maybe 3 long stories. They could well up because emotion shows up. Perhaps they would start to describe it to me by going down to the nth detail, 100 details, or giving me a very broad, very wide description. This is the lettuce. What someone does when you bring the burger and the condiments, their lettuce is that. Okay, I realize this metaphor is probably really not the most inspired one ever, but I have been playing a video game when I'm disconnected called Match 3D, and it means you match different images of things, and I always get caught up hunting the hamburger. So when I was thinking about the show today, that's what happened. The hamburger made its way into this conversation. So, all right, so we're going to go with it. So now let's think about cheese and tomatoes. So this is an interesting part because we don't really get to it unless the other person or the group of people are wanting what's missing too. This willingness and desire to find what's missing, it's not a given. It just isn't. Gosh, lots of people in any conversation, including me at times, will avoid getting to this level. Yeah, I don't know whether it's self-protection and defensiveness or habit or unconsciousness, but when you hit this level, if you don't recognize it for what it is, then you'll just stop. And your hamburger will be missing this. The cheese and the tomatoes. And if you want to, you could throw in the pickles or the avocado. You're welcome to call in right now and tell me what you put on your burger. That would be fun and interesting. Anyway, it's at this moment when you get to stop and pause and think about what is the next risk or your next vulnerability or the next opportunity you're actually faced with. Okay, so what I'm talking about is you work on your heart, talking about the burger, and then I'm saying we run into the lettuce, which is like where people show up and how they show up, right? And then we're faced with, are we going to get to add cheese and tomatoes and pickles and avocado? And basically, it's at this moment when you get to stop and pause and think about what you're going to do next. Lots of people, they just accept it for what it is. They stop right there. They don't want to work that hard. They don't know how to work hard. And without knowing it, that's the place where they end up living without more. So that's why I spend so much time talking about this earlier in the show, is I am taking the case that if you are listening, if you've gotten this far in the show, that you are wanting more and that you're willing to work at it to get it. And you can see how much effort has to go into it. And the reason that this missing piece exists is because we human beings, we're largely lost in our own world. We're mostly not in relationship with our whole selves. And we interact with others. I'm going to say this, even though I think it's going to feel a little like a bit of a pinch, where we're wanting to bounce off of others. Largely to hear ourselves talk. Now, underneath it, I know we're looking for something, but I think this is what we do a lot. So I want to speak into this. It's funny though, right? You're saying you're sitting there talking on that radio show where you're getting to hear yourself talk. True. Point taken. Absolutely. I am listening to myself as I speak. But one of the things that causes the missing feeling is not realizing that we're talking to hear ourselves talk, that we're talking to validate ourselves, and that we're talking to be seen by others. And, even we're talking or not talking to reinforce our beliefs that we hold about any aspect of life. I recognize you could be over there going, yeah, but what about the relationship? And it's all about relating and having companionship and right? Yeah, I know that's going on too, but we're looking at this growth piece today. We're looking to get more conscious of this missing feeling and where it's really coming from and what it's all about. So if we're talking to hear ourselves talk, but we're not really listening to what we're saying, then you can see why people would walk away and feel like something's missing. It's kind of a version of like an echo chamber. So picture it. This is a little exercise. Picture it. You're in a room with 4 people. And each time someone speaks, notice in this picture that they're talking to hear themselves talk, validating and affirming themselves, telling stories that are from the past, repeating themselves, and having no idea that they're doing it. So the conversation, it goes around and around until the available time is up and everyone goes back to their respective spaces, their rooms or their desk. Can you see the emptiness I'm trying to describe? And can you notice how each person would justify why they are saying what they're saying? Because it's actually being generated from their need to hear themselves talk. Can you also see why we would use agendas at meetings? Because I think it's super common that our communication patterns just aren't that conscious. I watch it all the time when I'm with clients. Person A doesn't like meetings and doesn't talk. Person B has a lot to say and references past history as a reason for everything, constantly explaining and directing the conversation. Person C talks over person B when they feel agitated and want to stop it. And person D waits until it's all over and can take away something they can act on or do. And I think in social settings, it goes the same way. The only difference is that there are often, no deliverables to walk away from. If we're going to work with what's missing, then we're going to have to understand the importance of being conscious with our own need to talk and be heard by ourselves. And then we're going to have to hone this skill of being vulnerable, bringing new information, and taking risk to cause something that goes further and deeper. Okay, we're headed to part 3 after the break, and I'm hoping that this is taking shape for you and that maybe you'll think about calling in when we come back.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Okay, we're back. I'm Sam Parrotto, and you are listening to Expedition Self. We are talking about that missing feeling. And before I went on break, I was spending a lot of time talking about what happens in communication that gets in the way of this it thing that we're on the hunt for. So I want to just make this point that we live in a society where I don't think most people get to talk enough about the pain in their life. They don't get enough attention. And I think largely they don't know that they're talking about their pain when they're talking, right? So, therapists spend a lot of time just listening and mirroring what's being said back to the client so that they can listen to what they're saying. And I know I've gone full circle here, but what I'm trying to help you see is that to find that missing feeling, you want to start listening to yourself consciously. Stop numbing out and going on autopilot in your interactions with others. Actually notice the words that are coming out of your mouth. Notice the repetitive nature of those words and notice what you're up to when you're talking. This idea that I'm chatting just to chat, I don't buy it. There's a reason that's central to our need for fulfillment that we're indirectly attempting to feed. And I think it has a lot to do with getting to this missing piece. That brings us to this. The missing piece, a lot of it is seeing you, and it is the being seen. And it's the shared emotional material and commonality and oneness that occurs when that happens. I see and participate in a lot of interaction as a pseudo attempt to getting to that point of being seen and seeing you and seeing others. But the challenge is that the pseudo attempt actually becomes the filler, and it becomes the norm, and we start to believe that it's all there is for us. It's just the way it is. It's just how that person is. It's just the way it's going to go. And we don't realize that we're settling and causing a lower grade exchange than's possible. There's a mediocrity in that. Not from a judgmental place, from a deeply experiential fulfillment and satisfaction place. I want you to put yourself in a bubble for a moment. And imagine yourself in the middle of some kind of a shared exchange with others, with like those 4 people, or it could be with one person. Then I'd like you to think about who you were being in that moment and whether you talked or you didn't talk. Now imagine that the people you are looking at all look like you. Truly, put your face and body on anyone you built into this scenario and picture that it is you. Now, what would you like each of them to notice or respond to? What do you really want to notice and say to each of them? Really? Think about it. What is there to say to yourself? What would you want to be acknowledged? How do you want to be seen? And then return their faces to the people you were in conversation with in the beginning. And what is happening inside of yourself? What do you notice about what there was to connect with them about? Can you see this bubble I'm talking about? I think as long as we fill this space with material that's wanting attention from ourselves, we won't actually get to that place where we take true risk with another about what's inside or in our heart, and we won't encourage others to do the same because we filled the table with lower grade food. So it's just the way it is really not what's true. What's true is that there's a different dynamic at play, trying to hear ourselves talk and see for ourselves and attend to ourselves. And we're not really even available. It's kind of like you can eat processed food that's got all the nutrients squoze out of it. I know that's not a real word. Or we can eat fresh food loaded with vitamins and popping with flavor. But it starts with you understanding that there is a difference. I'm linking your sense of emptiness or walking away from moments when you can't figure out what's missing with the very idea that you're interacting in ways that are low sustenance and offer smaller opportunities for fulfillment and are always going to leave you wanting. So you get to, hopefully, in this conversation, start to think about creating a bigger feast for the self. And what do people do with this low-level satisfaction? They drink, they eat, they seek out extreme sports or intense exercise programs, they work nonstop, they exhaust themselves, they buy things they don't need. We, that's all we, me. It produces excess in areas where we have control, where we can give ourselves something we didn't get. And a lot of times, the consumption of these other things only makes us more unconscious or more rigid and constricted. So this missing thing, this missing feeling, I'm talking about it, it's the anchor. It's the foundation, the true linchpin for choosing and creating a life versus unconsciously and voraciously, desperately, trying to get our need to connect emotionally met in less meaningful ways. The thing about this missing feeling is that it permeates our life. It isn't just affecting an interaction, because the more we're unfulfilled or unsatisfied, the more we disconnect from ourselves as a way of coping with it. Yeah, so being unfulfilled, it produces a state of less aliveness. And less aliveness then causes us to numb out more, to have less energy and become more apathetic and more immovable, less accessible, more close-hearted. This missing piece, this missing feeling, it may be, as I think about it, it may be the single most important aspect of doing life. And yet it's the most intangible. And it's also the one we have the most power over because it sets the standard, right? It starts the motor for our aliveness. Remember, when it's missing, it dictates a whole host of compensatory activities that may or may not make your life work. And gosh, it causes us to stay in jobs just because we're making money. Or we stay in relationships in the same way because we just don't think we care enough to change it. This leads me to how to want to go after the aliveness. What will it take to create a place where you bring it and as a result you cause others to want it? Gosh, that's huge, right? Because if others are in that deadening cycle and you've participated in the deadening cycle and are trying to reverse it, well then how are you going to bring the burger and make sure the condiments are on the bun? And how can you look at your whole life and notice where you only focus on getting through it or buying into it is what it is? How can you turn the volume up on creating something much more fulfilling in every moment, not just waiting for that unexpected windfall of emotional moments that happen at births or weddings or the completion of a big project or a graduation or a holiday. So here's where we are. You have to understand what vulnerability actually is. And you may be sick of talking about vulnerability, but I want to break it down into a lot of different parts. It's not just emotion. It's not just crying. It's risk. Vulnerability is risk with the self. It means that you risk changing your mind and looking bad and being embarrassed and not being the good one or the right one. It's admitting the truth that's looking to be seen and doing it in a way that doesn't make it the truth. Now, I could probably do a whole show on that, but the idea is that we get our truth out and then we are willing to look at it for what else might be under it. And vulnerability is learning how to listen to the self through a lens other than the limited critique and assessment of the mind. It's being present to what's happening in the heart, no matter what's there, no matter whether it's pretty or not pretty, and then stumbling over the words to try to describe it. It's telling someone that you need more sensitivity or more connection, and then being willing to be told you're not going to get it, and then staying vulnerable enough to look inward at what's going on with you and why it's happening, and maybe even say, ouch. It's the place where you are looking for more feeling, even if it's unpleasant or uncomfortable, knowing that you'll have something more to work with, and then hunting for words to describe it. I got a few more here, so don't get lost. Vulnerability is noticing you're dissatisfied, being open to seeing the world as something other than good and bad or black and white, and then wrestling with the discord that comes from trying to discover what is in the middle for you. Yeah, see, vulnerability, it's not just crying or being sad. It's that place where you push your awareness to the very edge of who you think you are, what you believe is right, and then turning back on it and questioning how you got there. It's really about taking stock of what you're doing in life to compensate for not having it or bringing it. Really looking at what you're doing in conversation that actually interferes with finding that missing feeling. I think if we define vulnerability more fully and you get clear on where it is in yourself, this is what you can bring to put that missing feeling into the space. And when you are working on all of this for yourself, then you can invite others into that with you, to share with you and make a space that's safe for them to go down a level of self and exchange with you. Okay, that vulnerability list was a very long list, but I'll tell you, I feel like that's what it takes, right? And I talk a lot about space and how to create it and how to hold it. And, safe space is a place where you can put yourself out in the light and be okay with whatever you see. So when you're trying to build a better burger, getting really good at making safe space for yourself first means that you're probably going to do the same for others. And if others don't respond to your reach, well, looking inside at how you occur as safe is a really important element to finding the missing feeling, because the missing feeling can't show up if people aren't safe. So have you thought about what makes you feel safe? Because sometimes we think being safe is leaving well enough alone. It's not. That's artificial safety. Safety that's a result of avoidance or sweeping it under the rug, and we don't get anything out of that. And I don't know a person who doesn't have that and work with it, right? That artificial safety we use to cocoon ourselves inside of our own bubble. But the sooner we're able to see it for ourselves, is the sooner you'll appreciate it when it shows up in your hamburger building activity, right? Building hamburgers means creating safe space for ourselves. I suppose the last thing I want to say about this whole thing is that I think we have to recognize how needy we are and people are, and how much we're needing to talk and hear ourselves talk, and how we want to empathize and care, and how big this need is. And the more stressful life is, I think the more thunderous, right, it becomes. So this can look like people being very talkative or talking about the same thing, or being very quiet and only talking about what they absolutely must. So it's important. This is just a little kind of disclaimer, right? Or a little road sign. You don't use your listening to feel like you're giving a gift to someone. Like, I just let them vent. I listened to them for a long time because it's what they needed. Yeah, you're not at risk there. You want to be wary of fluffing your own "I'm such a good person" feathers by being the one who meets this need for others. There's a power dynamic in it, and it doesn't really provide the true missing feeling, right? So, all right, I want to, actually, there was one more part of that dynamic piece I wanted to say. Yeah, you want to make sure that in the exchange, as you're practicing to build the burger, that you always put yourself out, and that you're willing to be the one who puts yourself out first and last, right? And only. Because that's you in search of your own missing feeling. So I found a poem by Christy Sharshall. It's called "Unseeing and Being Seen." So I'm going to read it for you, and then I'll come back and say goodbye. Every day, someone looks at me with conditioned eyes, making wild guess judgments about the length of my hair, the color of my skin, the maker of my shoes, never knowing what is real or who I really am. Once, someone looked at me through a compassionate heart, and all that was invisible was revealed in the light of it. Pain, fear, love, hope, fresh wounds and old scars, longing and aspiration, and my own heart smiled under that gentle gaze in the clarity of both seeing and being truly seen. I am hoping you're leaving today's conversation thinking about that missing feeling is tied to how you see and are seen, and how you can create those very moments inside of your life because of your intention to grow and develop and make every minute matter. I hope that you have a wonderful week. Thank you for spending the hour with me.